The fourth item on the agenda, page 215, is a pre-hearing review of a zoning text amendment in Manhattan Community District 5. Our presenter is Scott Williamson. Commissioner Svillo is recused on this item.
Good afternoon. So this is an application by JPMorgan Chase Bank for a zoning text amendment that relates to 270 Park Avenue. The referred and amended applications propose to create an alternate design option for public spaces required by the Greater East Midtown framework. The site is located in the East Midtown neighborhood of Community District 5. So the site at 270 Park Avenue is shown with the red dashed line. It is bounded by East 48th Street to the north, Park Avenue to the east, East 47th Street to the south, and Madison Avenue to the west. The site is located in the heart of Manhattan's Midtown Central Business District in an area characterized by tall, high-density commercial office buildings. Consistent with the surrounding area, the site is presently occupied by a commercial building, accommodating retail at ground floor and offices above. The building has a street wall along Madison Avenue and a plaza along Park Avenue. So the site has an area of 80,000 square feet. The zoning resolution has several requirements for public spaces on sites over 65,000 square feet in area, including being located on the through lot, which is shown here in green. It should also be open to the sky and be a minimum of 10,000 square feet in area. The through lot location offers two configuration types for the public space, which are dashed here in blue and red. So shown here in green is what the mid-block public space option might look like on the 270 Park Avenue site. The applicant indicated that this public space configuration would require the building to be designed with irregular floor plates that are undesirable for a contemporary Class A office building. To alleviate this issue, the referred application proposed allowing the public space to be located along Madison Avenue, where it could be co-located with the MTA entrance shown in yellow, which is outside the through lot portion of the site. So this alternative location is now shown here in, shown here in green is what the mid-block public space option might look like at 270 Park Avenue. Then we progress to the alternate location that is shown here in blue. To account for the consistent street wall on Madison Avenue, the referred proposed text amendment required the space to be enclosed. In red is the Metro North train shed, which occupies a substantial amount of the site's subgrade. Shown in orange along 48th Street and centrally are subgrade cores that must be situated on solid ground to service the building, including a loading dock and freight elevator core. In response to these constraints, the proposed text amendment, as referred, sought to allow the relocated and enclosed public space to have an area of 7,000 square feet, which is shown here in blue. So we've just discussed points 1 through 3 here, which summarize the referred text amendment. In addition, the referred text amendment would allow a kiosk to activate the space in lieu of retail continuity requirements, permit the use of the space for events, allow a variety of seating types to cater to different users, and require the space's walls to be used for the display of art and plantings. So the application was referred to Community Board 5 and the Manhattan Borough President. The Community Board voted to disapprove the application. The recommendation requested that the public space be at least 10,000 square feet or that a substantial public benefit should be provided to compensate for the loss of public space. The Manhattan Borough President recommended disapproval with conditions. Those conditions included the space should be at least 10,000 square feet and at the same grade as the sidewalk. Of that 10,000 square feet, at least 30% should be open to the sky. Pedestrian thoroughfare should not count towards the 10,000 square feet. And the final design should be subject to the approval of the Public Realm Improvement Fund governing group. Additional comments included any indoor space should provide public restrooms. The restrooms should be open the same hours as the public space. The kiosk should have Madison Avenue street frontage to provide retail continuity. And a significant contribution is required to be made to transport infrastructure, given the transit impacts of the proposed building. Examples identified by the Borough President of transit improvements included new staircase and elevator entrances to a rail mass transit facility within the proposed building, or alternatively, the applicant's adjacent building at 383 Madison Avenue, or another location in East Midtown. Otherwise, improvements could be made to the pedestrian corridor that connects the proposed building to Grand Central Terminal, or a contribution or in-kind repair to the Grand Central train shed beyond what is necessary for the construction of the proposed building, or an MTA substation to be constructed as part of the proposed building to provide the power for additional train service in conjunction with MTA's installation of communications-based train control on the Lexington Avenue line, which will reduce commute times and overcrowding on the line. So I should clarify here that while the Borough President's recommendations suggest that there are transit impacts, there weren't any identified as a result of the environmental assessment statement. So following the Community Board and Borough President recommendations, the applicant has progressed the design and amended its application, which I'll step through now. So as with the referred application, the amended application proposes to relocate the public space to Madison Avenue, where the space can be co-located with the MTA entrance shown here in yellow. That relocated space is now shown here in green on Madison Avenue. A key difference to the initial proposal is that the amended proposal requires the space to be unenclosed, which is more aligned with the existing zoning text. This would, however, require the existing street wall continuity regulations along Madison Avenue to be waived. So as with the referred application, the location of loading docks and freight elevators affect the configuration of how the public space can be designed. So in response, the public space, which is now shown here in green, is arranged around those site constraints. The space achieves 10,000 square feet by occupying the full Madison Avenue frontage and wrapping around onto a portion of 47th Street. This configuration requires additional flexibility in the existing requirements for plaza dimensions. The dashed purple line, blue line here, over the new building's loading dock and freight elevators that are shown in orange provides a point of reference for the plaza depth that would be required under the existing regulations. Also as shown here in the in plan and section in orange, the building could partially cantilever over the public space as long as no more than 60% of the space is covered. The cantilever must be at least 40 feet above the space and have an average of 50 feet as shown in the section. This configuration allows more sunlight into the space while also enabling a more optimal floor plate above. So we've just discussed the first 4 points in this list that summarizes the text amendment. In addition, the amended proposal would allow a kiosk to activate the space in lieu of retail continuity requirements, allow for flexibility in how seating and permitted obstructions such as planters are laid out along the Madison Avenue street frontage. And it would also allow for additional design flexibility related to difficulties associated with the MTA entrance, and it would do this via the mechanism of a chair certification. So both the referred and amended applications will be limited to sites that are 80,000 square foot or more in size and include an existing rail mass transit facility outside the through lot portion of the site. The ES did not identify any other sites other than 270 Park Avenue that this criteria would satisfy. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have at this time.
This is Madison Avenue, right here.
That's the corner of Madison and 47.
Questions? Commissioner De La Luz.
Does the amended proposal have any public restrooms?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Commissioner Levin.
Has the revised proposal been reviewed by Community Board 5 or the Borough President's office?
Yes, it was referred to both a couple of weeks back. We haven't received comments on them from them on the amended proposal.
Okay, and but they're aware that the hearing is happening on
Certainly, yeah.
Wednesday, one would hope. Okay. How does this plaza relate to the building entrance? I think one of the concerns with the enclosed space is it really, its qualities as public space were going to be overwhelmed by the entrance to an office building. So I'd be interested in knowing a little more about how the entrance will be configured with respect to this unenclosed space.
So the design I would have to leave the applicant to speak further to. Okay. However, the primary entry for the building is on Park Avenue. There intending for that to be a high volume entry space, and that's why they've separated it out. Their main entry will be Park Avenue, and this will be the space on Madison Avenue, which will have a connection to the building, but it will be a far more minor one, which would have to happen in between those two orange cores that sort of take up most of that frontage. So they're intending for some connection between the two, but certainly not the high volume connection that Park Avenue needs.
I mean, I appreciate that they've had some real challenges in dealing with this site and the significant train infrastructure that's below, and that there's a lot of planning that probably still has to happen before they really know what they're building. But I have to say these images are have significantly less detail than we usually see on an application of this sort. So if they could flesh in a little bit more detail at the ground level to indicate how the buildings will meet the public space and the sidewalks on both sides of the building, because my next question is, what are they planning on the Park Avenue frontage? I know there has been, at one point, some suggestion about using that as public open space, but all of those buildings, whether they do or not, all of the buildings along Park Avenue have paid particular attention to the way that the building meets the broader sidewalk there. What's going on there is that's not open space.
We don't have any design detail for that portion of it. This has been focused on the text amendment that relates to Madison Avenue. So they may be in a position to talk to you some more about it.
And then I have the same flavor of questions about the entrance to Grand Central. That will be part of this, the little yellow oblong that's shown there. And then how it relates to the building across the street, the building to the south, is that 383? Does that have a bonus thing inside it? There is an entrance to Grand Central inside that building, which is owned by the same applicant. And how do those access points relate to each other if they do?
Sorry, to step in for just I came up to answer one of your earlier questions, but I can answer your 383 Madison question as well, actually. 383 Madison was created with the Grand Central Subdistrict Special Permit in 2000, and it does have a privately owned public space at the ground floor, L-shaped corridor. It was not a bonus per se, it was a requirement through the special permit. The building achieved a 21.6 FAR through transferring development rights from Grand Central Terminal. It was the one and only building that used that special permit.
Ever did that?
Yes, that's right.
That's pretty grand space, but it has zero in it, absolutely nothing. I mean, you could play hockey in there, you could think of a lot of good active uses. And then through the barricade, after you've passed security, there's a tremendous lounge with a great TV and all sorts of stuff happening, but there is zero in that public space.
The quirk of the requirement, the zoning requirement for that space was that it was supposed to be a clear passage space to allow for free and open circulation.
It's a clear path.
And yeah, it's a clear path. I think, well, the applicant is actually thinking about some ideas of how to further activate it for the public, but that's not before us today.
Okay, yeah, no, our business here is about this entrance and how it might.
Yes, so actually I wanted to address your earlier question because you pointed out that the graphics you're seeing and that what the information you have in your packet is significantly less detailed than what the commission normally sees. And that is correct because this application is for a text amendment in which the CPC actually would never be approving building permits or even a privately owned public space design plan as part of this action. I do want to remind the commission that there will be a future action submitted by the property owner for certification of the POP space. But the action before you today is for a text amendment in which there are no building drawings being approved.
It's just
as part of the
process.
set.
Right.
Correct, yes, thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Delauze.
I recognize that the applicant decided to turn the corner on East 47th Street to try to address the concerns from the community board and the borough president. I'm just wondering, though, if they could describe more what the plans are for the space, make sure it's not just an afterthought.
Certainly. I guess at the moment, the primary intention of the text amendment is to reach the 10,000 square feet, and then we come back with the chair certification for the layout of the public space, which is down the track. And I suspect they may not have that design yet, but they will be able to tell you what they do have at the moment.
And especially since it's, behind the entrance there, I think it's going going to be disjointed if they don't give some thought to it.
Other questions? Then we'll see this at the public hearing on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Okay, and for those who were not in the room, I will note that we'll begin with a presentation by the applicant team, a 10-minute presentation, and that will then be followed by other speakers who will be given 3 minutes each. I would call forward the applicant team of Claire Dorfman, David Karnofsky, Devin Marr, Vishant Chakrabarty, and handwriting challenge, Jeremy something. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Lago, Commissioners. My name is Claire Dorfman, and I'm from JPMorgan Chase. We are here today to discuss a proposed text amendment which would facilitate the building of a world-class headquarters for JPMorgan Chase at 270 Park Avenue. This is a long-term investment in New York City, which validates the city's innovative East Midtown rezoning plan. JPMorgan Chase has called New York City home for over 200 years and is one of the city's largest private employers. With this project, we are demonstrating our commitment to New York City into the 21st century. We plan to build this project with union labor and are currently in the process of negotiating a PLA with the building trades. We are proud to call New York City home and appreciative of the opportunity to work collaboratively with all stakeholders in order to move this project forward. Now I'd like to introduce our team. Devin Mayer, Project Manager for JPMorgan Chase, David Karnofsky, our lawyer, Jeremy Dworkin from Foster Partners, and Vishant Chakrabarty, our design advisor. Thank you.
Good afternoon, David Karnofsky, Fried Frank. As the Commissioner is aware, JPMorgan Chase originally submitted an application for a text amendment that would allow for a 7,000 square foot interior space along the Madison Avenue frontage of the new building. The 7,000 square foot interior space had a number of positive features, but during the course of the public review process at the Community Board and the Borough President, we heard a very strong sentiment that the public space should be open air and have a size of 10,000 square feet. And in response to those comments, Chase, working with the design architect for the building, Foster and Partners, and their design advisor, Vishant Chakrabarty from POW, developed an alternative approach which would result in a 10,000 square foot open air public space along Madison. We then submitted an A application which includes a proposed text amendment to make the changes necessary for this to happen. The text amendment, we believe, adheres closely to the Greater East Midtown rezoning while accommodating the challenges of building over the transportation infrastructure below. And we think will result in a high-quality, well-used space consistent with what the city sought to accomplish under the rezoning. Today's hearing has been noticed to hear both the original and the A applications. However, our focus is on the A application because it is the application we intend to pursue. And I'm now going to turn it over to Devin Mayer, who will discuss the site and the need to relocate the space to Madison Avenue.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and Commissioners. We are grateful for the opportunity to appear in front of you today. I will spend the next few minutes providing an overview of our project and how the unique site location has caused us to approach the design of the mandatory open, publicly accessible space. Our site occupies a full block between Park Avenue and Madison Avenue and 47th and 48th Street. The image on the screen illustrates what the text as written tells us we need to do. Option 1 splits the building in half, and Option 2 creates compromised floor plates throughout the building that do not meet the needs of the JPMorgan Chase businesses that will occupy the space. The majority of our project site sits above Grand Central and the train shed and is illustrated by the white area on the slide. A small portion of our site sits terra firma and is highlighted in brown on the slide. As part of our design process, we evaluated the Option 2 placement of the POPs as illustrated in green, and we were unable to make this placement work with the design of our building, which I will now explain. Given our location over the train shed, we have a complex series of structural transfers highlighted in red that occur in and around the ground floor and are required to support the new building design. The depth of the structural transfers are limited by the active railroad tracks below and require us to elevate portions of our ground floor slab, which did not allow for us to create a compliant POPs. In addition to the structural transfers of our new building design, we have placed the elevator cores on the north and south side of the ground floor. The southern elevator core, highlighted in gray, creates a conflict with the POPs. Within the terra firma portion of our site, we have located truck elevators to access the below-grade loading dock and associated service elevators, and all of the incoming building services, including electric, steam, gas, water, and telecommunications that serve the building. The location of these elements within the terra firma portion of our site were very limited and are pushed as far east as they can without encroaching on the train shed to the east. All of these unique site conditions caused us to locate the POPs along the Madison Avenue frontage of the site. As David mentioned, we originally submitted an application for the 7,000 square foot interior open space, which is illustrated in the image on the left. During the course of the public review process with the community board and the borough president, we received strong feedback that caused us to revisit the design of the building, which allowed us to create a 10,000 square foot open air public space, which is illustrated in the image on the right. I will now turn the presentation over to Vishon and Jeremy, who will present the design.
Commissioners, Madam Chair, good afternoon. As Devin explained, because of the site constraints, we need to place the proposed POPs on 10,000 square feet on Madison. And you may ask, why is Madison a good urban design idea? As you know, Madison was added after the 1811 Commissioner's Grid was established primarily as a retail street. The zoning has always reinforced that idea with a strong street wall and retail continuity. However, it is at some level a victim of its own success. As you can see from this photograph, Madison, unlike Park, unlike Fifth, has become dark. It has become congested. It is not a terribly pleasant place to be as a pedestrian today. And we believe that that situation becomes even more important when you consider that this site, and particularly the southwest corner where 47th Street and Madison meet, is a major entry point not only from Grand Central Terminal, but a future entry point from East Side access. This is a gateway location, and to bring people in a gateway location into this very congested street wall environment we think is not a good idea, and so therefore proposing a POPs there creates a kind of foyer, a kind of moment of nature, of repose, to get your bearings and understand where you are in the city. This is why we think the POPs is very important, not only along Madison, but that corner as it extends around 47th Street, which is really where the vertical circulation is coming up from underground. And to explain that further is Jeremy Dworkin from Foster and Partners. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So as you've heard, we've been working very closely with the Department of City Planning and community stakeholders to develop this project. And in response to their feedback, we've been able to configure a 10,000 square foot open outdoor public space on Madison Avenue that stretches the entire frontage from 47th to 48th Street. It's going to include a kiosk and be open 24 hours a day. And we think that it's a really exciting opportunity to create a new public space in the city that will be both a place of relief from Madison Avenue and also a gateway, as Vishon mentioned, to the new transportation network. We have, in order to accomplish this, we've shifted the entire tower back from Madison Avenue, working with JPMorgan's programmatic requirements and also the incredible site constraints that Devin talked about. We have been able to step the tower on the north and the south side and also pull it in from Madison to open up and let the light come down to the plaza. And also on the right there, you can see the section. We've lifted the tower up to the 60-foot dimension to create a generosity in that space, which we think we can really create something special in. Just touching on ourselves, Foster and Partners, we have a great experience of creating public spaces, amazing public spaces throughout the world, and we look forward to working with the DCP and other community stakeholders as we design the plaza in full. And these are just some of the characteristics that we want to bring to this space in terms of qualities of light and water and planting in the space. And so just to touch on it, this is a photo of the existing conditions right now. This is the corner of 47th and Madison looking north. And you can see the existing building is pushed right up against the site boundary, a very tight condition against the bus lane. And then here is a potential image of what the future building could be like. The building is set back, it slopes up graciously, and it has an opportunity for planting that can create a separation from the bus lane and different pockets of space within the site. And so we're really excited that this is an opportunity to create something unique but also useful for the community. Now I'm going to turn it over to David, who's going to talk to you more in detail about the text amendment itself.
With regard to the text amendment itself, first of all, the text would allow for the location of the open space along Madison Avenue. Secondly, it would, in order to accommodate an open air space, waive street wall and retail continuity requirements that would otherwise apply along Madison Avenue. Third, if you apply the width and depth ratios that are generally required under the POPs regulations to the space, it would intrude into the terra firma area where building services are needed. And so that is going to be modified to allow for a wider and narrower open space along the full frontage of Madison.
I'm afraid your team members haven't left you enough time, Mr. Knapp.
Okay.
Questions from the Commission. Commissioner Levin.
Oh, well, yes, David, I wonder if you could just quickly review for us the changes that you're going to need with respect to sidewalk frontage, permitted obstructions, use of the building frontage facing Madison, the kiosk.
I will be happy to do so.
And I'm saving number 7 because I have a particular question about that one.
Certainly. With respect to the sidewalk frontage, the regulations have certain requirements with regard to the amount of unobstructed area along the street frontage in order to ensure passage into the open passage into a POP space. The text would modify that slightly to allow for somewhat less, but because of the wide frontage along Madison, we believe that there would be ample entryway into the space, and the modification would allow for some buffering, some planting and other buffering against Madison Avenue, which is a busy thoroughfare, has a bus stop, et cetera. So that's the purpose of that particular modification. And it also provides that seating that would otherwise be required to be located along 47th Street can be relocated into the open space, and that's because the 47th Street frontage is largely occupied by the rail mass transit entrance, which of course would remain, in one of the underlying purposes of this amendment is to co-locate the POPs with the entrance. In terms of permitted obstructions, the text would allow the building to be cantilevered over the open space for up to 60% of its area, thereby facilitating the types of large office floor plates that Jeremy described, while also ensuring an open, well-lit space. In terms of the building frontage that is at the edge of the POPs, on the eastern edge of the POPs, the regulations would otherwise require retail spaces and transparency. But as you heard, that is where the mechanicals and other building support systems in the terra firma will be located. So that would be waived, but in lieu of that, there would be a requirement to provide a kiosk within the space as a form of activation for the space. And then number 7, I gather you have a particular question.
Well, yes, because you're proposing new text here that I think is designed to relate to the mass transit facility. Well, maybe if you could go back to, you had a rendering of the building with a glass cube that looked like it might be there we go. So you're asking for a significant amount of flexibility to address the design considerations surrounding the Grand Central entrance. In fact, you're asking for permission to modify all of the remaining provisions of the POPs regulations, which seems like a whole lot of flexibility. So I'm wondering if you could tell us how that might be used, looking at this situation here. What kinds of issues might you need to be addressed?
Sure.
And why isn't this a blank check rather than just needed flexibility?
Right. Well, in terms of the text itself, it says that the modifications are those which are intended to address practical difficulties resulting from the presence of the entrance. So it was not the intent to allow for widespread waivers of the POPs regulations that are in any sense unrelated to the entrance itself.
Okay. So what kind of practical difficulties might arise?
With regard to the entrance itself, to the extent that any dimension of the entrance is modified, whether it's its width or its height, there would be a need to address that. The height itself is not permitted today, but if, for example, it were widened, there could be a need to, for example, waive some element of the circulation path requirements. So as this project proceeds and this entrance may evolve, we wanted the flexibility to accommodate it, since the overall purpose is, of course, to integrate the two together. So the idea, of course, is that there has to be a nexus, a clear nexus between the modification and the needs of the entrance itself. Nothing more than that. And if there's a need to clarify that in the report or in any other way, we're certainly happy to do that.
Okay, and those kinds of modifications would happen with a chairperson certification?
Correct.
Is there any kind of, would there be any kind of engagement with the community board or with the, I forget the name of the East Midtown Public Space Steering Committee? Is anyone else going to get to look at this, or do you just come talk to Marisa to get the waiver you need?
The text doesn't specify a process. We're happy to work out a process of consultation.
I would think, given the prominence and importance of this location and the importance of this open space for the surrounding community, that some degree of consultation with Community Board 5 as you seek a modification would be a prudent thing.
Well, in that regard, I just wanted to mention that while we are modifying and to some extent waiving certain POPs requirements otherwise applicable to this space in order to accommodate it at this location with this entrance, we, of course, are subject to the design certification process, have to come back to city planning with an actual design, demonstrate compliance, and, of course, have discussions about design. And in the course of that, we'd be happy to consult with other parties to show them what we're proposing and to get feedback.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask one more question? First off, I have to say I'm very excited by this transformation in the plans. This, to me, looks like much more inviting and usable public open space than the enclosed space we saw earlier. So I'm glad that your team extended itself to figure this out. You mentioned before the flexibility that you need on the frontages facing Madison Avenue because there are the service cores right behind it. I see a nice green wall that is designed there. I saw that mentioned in some of the press write-ups. That's certainly a wonderful feature. What can the walls right under that? What's just below the tree tops? Knowing that it's got solid stuff behind it, what can be done to those walls to activate them so they're not just dead backgrounds to the open space, if anything?
Commissioner, we're looking at a variety of options. As you know, we have to come back on design. We think there's anything from whether it's greenery to water to artwork. We think there's a variety of different options here. The water thing is interesting because there's a lot of acoustic issues with the bus lanes, but that's something that we're still determining.
Okay, but you're working to achieve something there?
Absolutely. There is a desire here to create a world-class space, and I think that we're going to look long and hard at what each of these elements can be to make sure that they're the best that they can be.
Yeah. Well, if anyone can figure it out, you can.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi, I note that both the Community Board and the Manhattan Borough President either opposed or disapproved with conditions. And the first comment in both cases was that there was insufficient space and we didn't meet the 10,000 required square feet. The Borough President had asked about some other benefits that might compensate for that, including indoor space that might include public restrooms, a kiosk with frontage along Madison Avenue, and contribution to transportation infrastructure. Could your team speak to whether they're taking into consideration any of the Borough President's comments?
Thank you, Commissioner. Let me start with the transit-related question. We are in daily discussions with the MTA and their leadership, working closely with them to come up with a solution for our project that takes into account the railroad that they're running underneath us and the East Side Access project they're building below the building. We can't speak publicly about those discussions at this time, but we are working very closely with them. As it relates to restrooms, we did evaluate the need at the time that we were looking at an indoor space. We believe that now that the space has been redesigned to an outdoor space, the need is not there. We understand that the comment has been made in the past. We believe that there are sufficient restroom facilities located within the terminal today, Grand Central Terminal today, as well as the future East Side Access Concourse, which can be accessed directly off of the plaza through the transit entrance.
How far away are those restrooms?
I don't have an exact distance, but they're down a flight of stairs and escalator.
And a corridor, right?
If you use the restrooms inside the terminal, they're down a corridor. If you use the restrooms, the future restrooms at the East Side Access Concourse, it's down 2 flights of stairs.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, the last point he didn't respond to, the kiosk with frontage along Madison Avenue.
I'm sorry. The kiosk, we're evaluating locations for the kiosk right now, whether it is on 48th Street adjacent to Madison or in some way incorporated into the face of the building. It hasn't been designed yet. We do intend to incorporate a kiosk. The location is just not finalized yet.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you. This question is perhaps for David or maybe Vishan. It says in our text, the proposed POPs rules will be available only to sites of 80,000 square feet or greater, which have an existing entrance to rail mass transit. I was wondering, do we know approximately how many sites this would apply to, aside from this one?
Yeah, what you're referring to is that what it says is that it would apply to qualifying sites with a lot area of 80,000 square feet or greater that include an existing entrance to a rail mass transit facility that is located outside the through lot portion of the site. There's only one such site.
Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant team? Thank you for the presentation. We will now turn to comments from Borough President Gale Brewer. And as usual, there is not a time limit.
I'm back. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I want to thank the chair and the commissioners. I am Borough President Gale Brewer, and I am here to deliver a statement in support of the proposed text amendment to the East Midtown Subdistrict. When the mayor's office proposed a zoning for the East Midtown neighborhood in 2004, then Councilmember Dan Garodnick and I and the community board and many others co-chaired the East Midtown Steering Committee. We co-chaired it and many people participated. It was truly a community planning process. The steering committee helped guide the rezoning by developing a list of priorities and recommendations, as I think you all know. All through that process, one of the concerns that kept coming up was the public realm. This was a vital issue to a broad range of people, the businesses, the employees, the preservation groups, and the real estate industry. Everybody agreed without quality public space in East Midtown, we would not be fostering places where people would want to spend time, and we would not be participating in good planning. The Department of City Planning, with all of these concerns, rightfully instituted a publicly accessible space requirement for lots measuring 65,000 square feet or more, a provision that captures a site at 270 Park Avenue. 270 Park is required by the zoning to provide a publicly accessible space that is at least 10,000 square feet. That space must be open to the sky. That's why I was disappointed when I first learned that JPMorgan was proposing a publicly accessible space that would be 3,000 square feet smaller than what is required, and that the space would be enclosed. I am sensitive to the site constraints that JPMorgan is facing, particularly with its location above a train shed, but I was not convinced, nor was anybody else, that those constraints warranted an open space that would deviate so far from the requirements established by East Midtown zoning and 100,000 meetings. I believe that quality open spaces have the power to mediate the density of office uses in East Midtown. When I issued my recommendation back in January, I was certain that JPMorgan could fit a 10,000 square square-foot publicly accessible space on their site, and I requested that at least 30% of it be open to the sky. I'm really pleased and delighted to see that the presentation JPMorgan has given here today meets those goals, as you heard. The newly proposed 10,000 square foot space will be open to the sky with a portion of the building cantilevering at least 50 feet above the open space. JPMorgan has worked around the significant site constraints to arrive at a much better space for the public, as you have seen. Anticipating that the space would require an amendment to the East Midtown zoning text, even if it met my conditions. I also requested that JPMorgan provide a transit improvement that goes beyond the existing Grand Central Terminal entrance on their site. JPMorgan is still requesting changes to the zoning, and as such, I urge them to seek viable transit improvement options on their site, and I heard earlier that they are in constant contact with the MTA. Lastly, I want to note that JPMorgan proposes to allow modifications via chair certification to almost all of the section 37070 of the zoning resolution, which governs public plaza, in order to address practical difficulties that stem from the existing Grand Central Terminal entrance on its site. I request that this language be more precise. The chair certification should specifically refer to subsections of 3770 and also be geographically limited in scope, so the design team has sufficient flexibility without creating a potential loophole in the zoning resolution. Clarifying this language should become possible as the design for the building nears its completion. And I want to be clear that this chair certification would not allow JPMorgan to create an open space that is less than 10,000 square feet. That size requirement is established in the zoning resolution. The proposed text amendment before you today demonstrates the benefits that a public review process brings to a project. Too often, developers and even some of those responsible for planning believe that a rigorous process is just a tool to stymie development. This, today, is a good example of how a rigorous process is really a tool to improve development and make sure everyone's goals are served. And as the first development proposed under the East Midtown zoning, 270 Park will be setting the tone for the developments to follow. I am glad that JPMorgan decided to stay at the table to figure out a way to create a much better space that suits East Midtown. And I believe that the proposed open space will bring vitality to the area, and I look forward to seeing its completion. And in terms of the bathrooms, I take full responsibility for the bathrooms at 1 Vanderbilt. I have spent a great deal of time in those bathrooms. They don't exist yet, but I am responsible for those bathrooms. But I think it should be considered. You do have to have a human being. Cannot be left unattended, I believe, but I think it's worth discussing. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Questions for the Borough President? Thank you for coming back again.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Rochelle Patrikoff, who will be followed by Patrick Dolan.
Good afternoon. My name is Rochelle Patrikoff, and I'm here to deliver a statement on behalf of the Grand Central Partnership. The Grand Central Partnership enthusiastically supports the application by JPMorgan Chase requesting an amendment to the East Midtown zoning text to enable it to build a new, state-of-the-art, open-air, publicly accessible, privately owned public space on the Madison Avenue frontage of a newly planned 270 Park Avenue office tower that would be home to all of its global headquarters operations. As you know, GCP was pleased to have partnered with Manhattan Borough President Gale Brewer, former council member Dan Garodnick, and other neighborhood stakeholders to help frame and shape the process for the rezoning of Greater East Midtown. These zoning changes facilitate this new development and others to build modern office towers to accommodate the needs of businesses in the 21st century with new, open, energy-efficient office towers. It's also responsible for the creation of public realm improvements, including much-needed mass transit enhancements. East Midtown rezoning is enabling one of New York City's largest employers to demonstrate its long-term commitment to New York City and Midtown East and the Grand Central neighborhood, with a 21st century headquarters building that will be designed to not only meet the needs of its workforce and global business, but to also contribute to the vitality of our community. The current application that is before the Commission will enable JPMorgan Chase to introduce a spectacular, open, and accessible green urban space for the benefit of the Midtown East community. In order to deliver this new POPs, JPMorgan Chase is asking for this text amendment to shift the location of a 10,000 square foot POPs from a mid-block location to Madison Avenue. The text amendment also seeks to modify street wall retail continuity and design regulations in order to permit this open green space at the alternate Madison Avenue location. The shift of the POPs to Madison Avenue will offer the community two significant and valuable benefits. First, improving pedestrian traffic along a heavily trafficked Madison Avenue, and second, the cantilever design of 270 Park Avenue, rising above the POPs, will provide additional sunlight to the open space and improve sight lines for pedestrians walking along Madison Avenue. Grand Central Partnership looks forward to continuing to work with JPMorgan Chase on this exciting project.
Good timing. Thank you.
Okay.
Questions for Ms. Patrickhoff? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Patrick Dolan, who will be followed by Chris Comfrey.
Good afternoon. I'm here to speak on behalf of over 8,500 union construction members of the Enterprise Association of Steam Fitters, Local 638. The union men and women of the steam fitters are responsible for helping to build and maintain iconic New York City landmarks such as the new Freedom Tower, the Empire State Building, Yankee Stadium and Citi Field, LaGuardia and Kennedy Airports, and many more. Today, we're here to support the construction of JPMorgan Chase's new world headquarters at 270 Park and to support the text amendment. The development, which would be the first to take advantage of the 2017 East Midtown rezoning plan, would offer real jobs, economic development, and deepen that financial company's roots in our city. Architects Norman Foster and partners have designed a far more modern, efficient tower that will use less energy and water per tenant than its predecessor. The public will get the use of 10,000 square feet of open public air plaza along Madison Avenue, and won't just be good for JPMorgan, but will help modernize the neighborhood's use of the public plaza and help small businesses in the area. The mayor personally championed this rezoning because he understands that this project will mean what this project will mean for the neighborhood and the city. He knows business leaders will want to come and build deeper roots in New York City. He knows the best trained union construction workers will build these buildings and help lead our city further into the 21st century. Companies that take advantage of the rezoning plan will have, as JPMorgan, will have to make real capital improvement in public infrastructure and transportation, as exemplified in this text amendment. According to the Office of the Mayor, projects like the future one at 270 Park will translate into real improvement to the subways, better walking space around Midtown East, and real utilizable public spaces. As a city, we need to be mindful of how important it is to attract the best companies that are willing to pay their employees good salaries and give back to their host city. JPMorgan will accommodate up to 12,000 employees at its new headquarters. This is to the benefit of New York City, and JPMorgan clearly sees the benefit of being here. When a company like JPMorgan commits to building a mega tower with union labor, we need to listen and support that project. A project of this magnitude could create 8,000 union jobs. We are not just talking about jobs for steam fitters, we're talking about plumbers, welders, metal workers, carpenters, and so many more. On top of that, these opportunities are substantial for minority and women-owned businesses. This new tower, once completed, will stand amongst the tallest in the city and the world. And we're here to support the building of this tower and the new text amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Dolan? Thank you. Our next speaker will be Chris Comfrey, and he will be followed by Rob Burns. Is Mr. Comfrey here? Ah, yes.
No.
Oh, I guess not. Okay, we will move on to Rob Burns, who will be followed by Santos Rodriguez.
You, Rob?
Okay, it appears Rob Burns is not here. We will move on to Santos Rodriguez.
Good evening, Commissioners.
It feels like it's already evening.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I am Santos Rodriguez. I am testifying on behalf of Gale, President of the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York and vicinity. I'm here to testify in support of the zoning text amendment for the JPMorgan Chase Bank headquarters. The Building and Construction Trades Council is an organization of local building and construction trades unions that are affiliated with 15 international unions and the North American Building Trades Unions. Our local union affiliates represent approximately 100,000 union construction workers. The building trades mission is to raise the standard for all of living, to raise the standard of all living for all workers, to advocate for safe work conditions and collectively advance working conditions for our affiliated members, as well as all workers in New York City. The JPMorgan Chase Bank headquarters is a 2.4 million square feet office building that will include sites and transit improvement in addition to interior and structural demolition and construction. The project is anticipated to require 3,700,000 plus hours by construction workers across various skilled trades. This project will provide significant construction jobs. Additionally, JPMorgan Chase has committed to reaching a project labor agreement, ensuring that all workers on this project will receive a fair wage and benefits. This is an important project that is vital to the economic development of our city. Furthermore, JPMorgan Chase Bank has made $42 million contribution into Public Realm Improvement Fund. Improving the zoning text amendment will facilitate construction of JPMorgan Chase Bank New World's headquarters in East Midtown. We thank you for the opportunity to testify and support the rezoning amendment. We urge to approve this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Our next speaker will be Michael Picarello, followed by Philip Fiorentino.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Picarello. I speak on behalf of the New York City District Council of Carpenters, a 25,000 member organization. This project will provide thousands of good-paying jobs for the middle class of New York. It will also provide many on-the-job training opportunities for many young adults from New York looking for apprenticeships, which will lead to careers in the building trades. JPMorgan Chase has been serving New York City for over 200 years. As we can see, they are doing everything they can to make sure this project works for the community. They deserve to have a state-of-the-art future landmark tower here in the heart of Midtown, New York City.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Picarello? Okay, then we will move on to testimony from Philip Fiorentino, followed by Leila Lopes.
Commissioners, Chair, I want to thank you for speaking. My name is Philip Fiorentino. I'm testifying on behalf of the New York City District Council of Carpenters. Just a little brief history of what a carpenter does. We do everything from the dirt to the drapes. Everything you see before you that's fabricated, screwed, and put together is done by a carpenter. We also represent specialties that does the bridges, the tunnels, the dock builders, the millwork. We are 25,000 members strong. We also represent 60,000. That includes their families, their wives and children as well. We are in support of the JPMorgan Chase, the building of 270 Park. I've heard One Vanderbilt out here a couple of times. We're currently building that as well. We're used to large projects of this size. We're excited to put our members to work. I'm a business agent with the New York City District Council of Carpenters. I have been an elected warden to the New York City District Council for 7 years, and I represent my members as well. And it's our job to provide jobs for them. In the day and age that we're in today, with Rebney and Open Shop, which is a totally different issue, to have JPMorgan Chase come in and say that they're going to build union humbles me 100%. And I also speak on behalf of the leadership at the council that we will be in full support of this project. and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Fiorentino?
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Our next speaker will be Leila Lopes, followed by Isaiah Thompson.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Leila Lopes. I am the acting chair of the Land Use, Housing, and Zoning Committee of Manhattan Community Board 5. We are grateful that JPMorgan Chase is considering meeting the minimum public open space requirement for their proposed building. As you know, they had initially proposed a 7,000 square feet POPs, and we are pleased that much needed congestion relief will be provided by the public space as designed currently. Although we are satisfied with the size of the POPs, we do want to share our concerns about the creation of a new certification by the chair of the CPC permitting design modifications to the POPs. The new certification would be too broad and could be misused. We would request that such modifications be limited. They should be minor, and in no way should they affect the net or gross size of the public space. Because the site was not considered by DCP as a development site during the rezoning process, much remains uncertain about this project. No doubt, Foster and Partners will deliver quality architecture. But where you see a building, we see 14,000 people. The building currently houses 6,500 employees. It will double its capacity. In an increasingly congested area, how will our infrastructure be upgraded? Had the site been included in the greater East Midtown rezoning, transit upgrades would be part of the public review. We request that any transit improvements associated with the redevelopment of the site be presented to the public for their review and input. As DCP failed to include the site to the list of development sites, transit impact was unfortunately not evaluated in the EAS or EIS. We request that the transit and infrastructure environmental impact of this particular building be assessed. On the same topic, the building's shadow impact was not evaluated for the same reasons. We would like to request that a shadow study be mandated to evaluate the impact of the tower on open space. As you can imagine, the shadow cast by a building of such density will not be insignificant. Finally, we are concerned that the very first project off the gates in the newly rezoned Greater East Midtown is seeking a zoning tax amendment. We hope it will not set an unfortunate precedent. Is the tax inadequate? If JPMorgan gets a zoning tax amendment, does that tell every other developer that they should get their own amendment? It's ironic. The real estate industry is so attached to the as-of-right framework. They negotiated so arduously to get an as-of-right East Midtown. And yet, even with this massive upzoning, they always seem to want more. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Lopes? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Isaiah Thompson, followed by Ken Fisher.
Good morning. I'm Isaiah Thompson here on behalf of the New York Building Congress, which includes more than 550 constituent organizations and New York's design, construction, and real estate industries. I would first like to thank the Commission for this opportunity to testify on the proposed text amendment. The Building Congress wholeheartedly supported the East Midtown rezoning, and now we urge this body to support the zone text amendment that will facilitate the construction of JPMorgan Chase's New World headquarters in East Midtown and better integrate the accompanying public space. This project is the first major development of the 2017 East Midtown rezoning and advances the key public policy goals of rezoning, the creation of meaningful public spaces that residents and visitors can and will enjoy, and development of modern, sustainable office space in a variety of methods. Firstly, this text amendment addresses unique constraints at this specific site and will allow for the construction of 10,000 square feet open-air public plaza on Madison Avenue that will revitalize the area and provide sustainable public benefits. JPMorgan Chase has retained leading architects to design a world-class building with thorough, well-integrated public spaces. The headquarters project demonstrates JPMorgan Chase's commitment to the New York City and its diverse, skilled workforce. The new building will accommodate up to 12,000 JPMorgan Chase employees with a wide range of high-earning 21st century jobs. The project will be governed by project labor agreement and will create approximately 8,000 union construction jobs. And overall, this text amendment facilitates a much-needed advancement of spaces in the public realm, and the New York Building Congress urges you to support this amendment. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Questions for Mr. Thompson? Thank you. Our next speaker is Ken Fisher, who will be followed by Katie Schwab.
I'll waive my time.
Okay.
So who knows?
I'm Katie Schwab. I'm just presenting a letter on behalf of Rob Burns, the president of the East Midtown Partnership. Chair Lago and Commissioners, my name is Rob Burns, and I'm president of the East Midtown Partnership, a business improvement district covering all or part of 47 blocks of Midtown Manhattan. In that capacity, I served as a member of the East Midtown Rezoning Steering Committee, which developed the proposal unanimously approved by City Council and the City Planning Commission to modernize the commercial building stock in a new subdistrict. As you know, the terms of this upzoning also place specific requirements on developers in exchange for greater density, including transit and public realm improvements. The proposed redevelopment of the JPMorgan Chase World Headquarters at 270 Park Avenue is exactly the type of new investment in East Midtown Manhattan that the steering committee hoped to encourage through rezoning, and I urge the City Planning Commission's approval of the zoning text amendment. This project will be the first to take advantage of the rezoning plan, and it meets the key public policy goals prioritized by the steering committee: the creation of meaningful public realm improvements and the development of modern world-class office space. JPMorgan Chase has retained leading architects to design the building and public space, and the text amendment addresses unique constraints at this specific site, allowing for the construction of well-integrated public space through a 10,000 square foot open-air public plaza on Madison Avenue that will provide substantial public benefits to an area in which public space is sorely needed. Furthermore, the terms of this project includes a $42 million contribution by JPMorgan Chase into the Public Realm Improvement Fund, which the East Midtown Governing Group will later utilize to improve the public space in the area. Finally, this project demonstrates JPMorgan Chase's commitment to New York City and its diverse, skilled workforce. The new building will accommodate up to 12,000 employees in a wide range of good-paying 21st century jobs. The development itself will be governed by a project labor agreement and create approximately 8,000 union construction jobs, while also providing substantial opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses. In conclusion, JPMorgan Chase will bring modern commercial space to 270 Park Avenue, and it's exactly the sort of new development that the steering committee anticipated. I urge your approval of the zoning text amendment so the project can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Schwab? Okay. That is the last person who was signed up to speak on this topic. If there is anyone else present who'd like to be heard, please come forward now. I'm sorry.
Signed up to speak. I don't have my card.
No, I'm sorry.
Lynn Ellsworth, I had signed up.
Oh, please, welcome. Come forward.
I'm Lynn Ellsworth. I'm with Human Scale NYC, a citywide nonprofit. A preamble to this is that we have looked into POPs a great deal. I recently participated in a walking tour of every single POPs south of Chambers Street. It was documented. We were preparing a little slideshow. I think one of our conclusions is that the whole trade-off between FAR and POPs has failed totally in the zoning code. Over 90% of the POPs we saw were miserable, either from providing an actual amenity or being maintained. So for this reason, we oppose the amendment. We think that certain things are backwards. The city as a whole just does not have a comprehensive enforcement system for regulating POPs, and it's not ready for prime time. Also, we're kind of amazed to find this address itself in front of DCP at all. Wasn't everything about the public realm already negotiated during the Midtown East ULURP? And during that, I noticed that many groups, I'm thinking of the City Club's testimony, for example, proposed comprehensive public realm plans, urged the DCP to do so, and none of that was really considered. So it raises a question for our group: why, despite all this, and despite all the many well-considered suggestions offered to the city during the ULURP, Did they ram the East Midtown rezoning through with all its many faults and gaps, which we're now addressing here? The answer, I think, lies in this spreadsheet. It's a list of all the donors to former Councilmember Dan Garodnick. He served as one of the main cheerleaders for the rezoning, and it is fascinating that the law firm of Paul Weiss, Rifkin, and Wharton gave Garodnick a whopping $186,958 in campaign contributions over 3 election cycles. That's over 12% of his total take in those 3 years. That firm proudly lists every big developer and property owner in East Midtown as a client, but JPMorgan and SL Green specifically. I guess that's why nobody else's voices could be heard over that kind of cash. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Ellsworth. Questions? Okay, so I will again ask if there is anyone else present who would want to be heard to please come forward. Then the public hearing is closed.
Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 39, CD4 N190205 ZRM. A public